Welcome back to another episode of the HigherUp podcast. I'm your host, Michael Smoke, and today's episode has been repeatedly requested by you guys following some content that I posted around this topic. Today's episode is going to be all around the concept of prolonged fasting. Now, that is a term I can't even really use on social media because every time I've ever posted a video about it, it gets taken down for promoting eating disorders, disordered eating, or something parallel to that. And I understand that fasting is a tool that some people abuse, but it is a tool that I have used and leveraged in my journey to self-development, physical health, fat loss, spiritual development, and the like for many years now, and I enjoy it. And so I want to preface this episode by saying I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, and I'm not recommending you do anything I'm about to share with you. I am simply speaking on my experience and talking about how I approach and why I approach the topic of prolonged fasting and sharing a little bit about how and why it's been helpful for me following your hundreds of questions around the content 2 weeks ago or so where I said I had done a 42-hour fast. I have done longer, I have done shorter. I fast intermittently every single day, whether that's waiting until noon to eat, waiting until 5 to eat, or waiting until 7 p.m. to eat. Some form of fasting exists in my routine every single day. And for me, fasting has been a powerful way to control my caloric intake as a former fat guy because my appetite is my biggest enemy sometimes. As a guy who is 40 to 50 pounds overweight for the majority of his adult life, I like to eat. And so there is no magic with intermittent fasting. It is simply a way to constrain your calories into a tighter window, thereby making it easier to adhere to your caloric targets. In my case, at the time when I discovered fasting, my caloric deficit. Prolonged fasting, however, and what will be the focus of this episode is a bit of a different beast. So I'm going to take it back to where I first heard about prolonged fasting. And I heard about prolonged fasting first, before I heard about it for spiritual or religious reasons, from a YouTuber strictly for fat loss reasons. And his name was The Snake Diet. I don't know if he still makes content. This is a very niche YouTube channel. A couple of people have mentioned they've heard of him when I mentioned that I drink something called snake juice on a fast, which I'll get to in just a little while. But this guy is a little bit crazy. He starts every video with, "What's up, you fucking fatties," or something adjacent to that statement. And what he does is he repeatedly balloons himself up in body fat and then uses prolonged fasting to lose fat quickly and show people how it's done, but also to show people that it works. You won't lose muscle. You can still have a good physique and you can lose fat quickly. And it's a great example of everyone knows something you don't and everyone can teach you something. And while I thought his content was a little bit unorthodox, I mean, this was way back in 2019 that I probably found out about this and did my first long fast, that I heard about his content, heard about this concept. And while he's a little wacky and a little bit abrasive, he had a lot of good insight around this topic and he helped me understand how to leverage it. So that's where I heard about prolonged fasting. And that's where I did my first prolonged fast in probably 2019, early 2019, maybe late 2018. I'm not exactly sure the timeline. Excuse me, I'm a little bit congested. The whys behind prolonged fasting, why I do it, there's a couple of different reasons that have evolved over the years. Briefly, I want to touch on the spiritual and religious reasons I fast. In the last year or so, I have made more of a concerted, deliberate effort to get closer with God. And I learned about the power of fasting from the pastor who I listen to, Philip Anthony Mitchell, who's based here in Atlanta out of 2819. And I had heard about fasting biblically, but I didn't understand why. And he described it very eloquently once in a sermon that I went to at 2819, where he said, the premise of fasting is one, to break yourself in the presence of God, but also to weaken the flesh, because when you weaken the flesh, you can increase the spiritual signal, the spiritual antenna, if you will. You can make that signal sharper. And there's so many stories of people having powerful spiritual breakthroughs and religious breakthroughs when they're on a fast. So I have done fasting through a few difficult times in my life to get closer to God and to hear his voice more clearly and to pray and to gain clarity on things that I want to do spiritually. And it's been interesting and beneficial, I will say that. And so if you are religious, Pastor Philip says fasting is not an option, which I find very interesting. He says it's a requirement for Christians. He even had his church, if they wanted to, partake in a 6-day fast with them. And I heard a lot of powerful stories come out of that. So there are spiritual components that can be very powerful to fasting. The way that it caught traction and the way that I posted about it. I alluded to the fact that I do in fact do it for spiritual reasons. However, this particular fast was for physical reasons. It was for two main reasons. One, the discipline and rigidity, and two, the fat loss. So the physical aspect of fasting is also very powerful. I think it's very interesting that most people will go through their life and never experience what true hunger actually feels like. Most people will never experience more than a craving. Oh, I want this. I want that. Yeah, but have you ever really felt true hunger? I have, and it's different, and it teaches you a lot. And I think the principle and the premise of abstaining from something as simple and necessary as food can teach us a lot. Because a lot of people think, oh, I'll die if I don't have my food every 3 to 4 hours. No, you won't. You just won't. That's not how we're hardwired. That's not how our body works. If that were true, we wouldn't store thousands of calories of body fat on our body so that we can tap into that when we need it. You don't need to eat every 3 hours. You can even go days without eating. Again, not recommending any of this. I'm not a physician. But purely from a physiological standpoint, you don't need to eat every 3 hours to feel normal. That's not normal, actually, I would argue. So the premise of doing hard things, that the challenges that I talk about every single day, doing something hard every day to prove to yourself you are who you say you are and that you can do hard things, fasting is a great way to do that for me and me personally. Again, not recommending this to anybody. Fasting is a powerful way because abstaining from something as simple and essential to life as food teaches you a lot. And the power of sitting with your hunger and being able to do that comfortably is a very interesting and enlightening process. It is one of the simplest forms of abstaining that you can possibly adopt, is just to stop eating. And so that's part of what interested me. The other part is that it breeds clarity. Now, there are physiological things that happen when you fast for a prolonged period of time. When you surpass 24 hours, you go to bed like fasted and wake up the next day, go about the day, go into another night. You enter a state of ketosis. And with that can come a sense or a feeling of improved mental clarity, improved focus, increased sense of well-being. It's for a couple of main reasons. One of them is that your body is utilizing and creating a massive amount of ketones, things like beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the how do I describe this? It's the energy source that we derive from fatty acids that can feed our body and our brain. And so that can be often described as a cleaner fuel source for the brain, and why some people feel good. But the other side of that is that truly when you enter a fasted state, evolutionarily, your body's like, well, we got to find food. So how do we make him or her more motivated to find food? I know what we can do. We can increase his norepinephrine and his dopamine and his epinephrine or adrenaline so that he feels more motivated. He feels sharper. She feels clearer. She sees better, feels like she smells better maybe. No, it really, what is happening is those neurotransmitters that I've talked about in the past being boosted by cold plunges, for example, those also elevate when we go into a fasted state because we're in a stressed state. Not eating for multiple days is a form of hormetic stress or a potentially healthy stressor for the body. So norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine elevated would, in early human history, because our brain doesn't know that we're not in the woods living in a cave trying to forage for berries. It doesn't know we have AC and pantries full of bullshit. So it says, let's elevate these neurotransmitters to motivate this person to go find food. And that's why people will say, oh, I thought I saw clearer. I smelt food more sharply, but I also had this amazing sense of clarity and well-being. I just felt so good. A lot of that is the neurotransmitters being released by the brain to motivate you to go find food. But it does breed a period of clarity. I will use fasting as a period of reflection. I'll write down my goals. I'll journal my thoughts. I'll journal the experience as it's happening. I spend a lot of time in prayer, as I've alluded to in the past few minutes of this. Oh, Jesus, I just hit something on the bottom of my desk. What is that? What the fuck? Sorry, stand by. That's annoying. Where was I? Oh, I've used these as a period to get clear on my goals and where I want my life to go, because I think that's important too. So those are some of the physical benefits. The last, and I guess reason we're here, you're here, is the fat loss component. When it comes to prolonged fasting, it should be no secret that if you abstain from food for 36, 48, 72 hours, you're going to be burning pure fat. You might burn some amino acids, some muscle tissue, not a lot. That's why we have fat. It's our body's preferred energy source when we're not eating. Don't worry. Fat loss will happen quickly. So when I go on a cut, for example, let's say, my last cut, I was 197 pounds, 98 pounds. I just wanted to lose like 7 pounds. I know realistically I could do that comfortably in 6 to 8 weeks. 500 calorie daily deficit for me, that's 2,700 calories a day. If I throw in 3 36-hour fasts in there, no food for a day and a half, in theory, that would put me in the same caloric deficit that roughly 1 week of dieting would. Now, it's not perfect. The carryover is not exact, but we know there's roughly 3,500 calories of stored energy in a pound of body fat, right? 500 calorie deficit per day times 7 days per week would put you in a 3,500 weekly caloric deficit. We know there's roughly 3,500 calories of stored energy in 1 pound of body fat. So, in theory, that would equate to 1 pound per week of fat loss. Now, I have a caloric maintenance of somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500. So if I go 36 hours without eating, I've placed myself into a theoretical 30,000-ish calorie deficit. And I say that's theoretical because the numbers aren't exact, but I can see for someone like me that doesn't ever swing more than 10 pounds and doesn't have a lot of fat to lose, I can see visible differences in my leanness after a fast. I can't. I've lost fat for sure. So I will leverage 36s specifically, 36-hour fast specifically, when I'm in a fat loss phase. And that will take my cut from 8 weeks to 5 weeks easily if I do 3 of those. I mean, it really is effective. So the fat loss component of fasting cannot be understated. I'm not telling you to do this for fat loss. I'm telling you what I've done and what works. It is effective just to not eat for a long period of time when you want to be in a caloric deficit. And sometimes for me mentally, as a guy who struggled with food focus, food noise, I almost feel like turning the hose off is easier than letting the faucet drip. Does that make sense? What I mean by that is some days it's hard for me to stick to a caloric deficit, but mentally, some days it's easier for me to just turn the switch off and go, oh, I'm not eating today. And that's just that. There's no room for negotiation. There's no room for, oh, but if this, then that. And what if I just have a little bit of this, that? There's none. There's none. I'm just not eating during this period. I'm abstaining. And I found that mentally freeing. And also coming off of a fast, that first bite of whole natural food, like your body really starts to crave nutrient dense food after you haven't eaten for a day and a half, 2 days, 3 days. You want food that is good for your body. So I guess another benefit that I don't have written down that I'll speak on is it is a great opportunity to reset your palate. I did that with my last fast a couple of weeks ago. I had just gotten in the way of having too many bites of bullshit here and there. I was drinking too much booze. Like I was just being a bit of a degenerate. I didn't look bad. I was lean, but I didn't feel great. My skin health wasn't great. And so I just decided I want to feel true hunger again. I want to reset my taste buds. I want to crave whole natural foods. And I fasted and it worked. And since then, I've been eating predominantly whole natural foods. Still sprinkling some seed oils here and there. Come on, you got to live a little. But it is helpful for doing that. If you find yourself constantly craving bullshit, turn the hose off for a while. Your body will crave what it wants and what it really needs. So now you know a little bit about the potential benefits of fasting, both spiritually and physically. Let's talk a little bit about the prep, because in my coaching community, I had a couple of questions yesterday on our group call about how I set up a fast. So Max, Kat, this is for you two who asked the question about prolonged fasting. I told you I'm just going to make an episode on it because that'll be easier for everybody, because this is a longer explanation than would have been beneficial for the group call. If you're interested in joining the coaching community, you can hit the link in my bio. I'll also put the link in the description of this podcast if you're interested in joining. You can also DM me fit if you're interested in joining the community. But I digress. The prep for fasting is fairly straightforward. You could argue there's a mindset component, a mental preparation component, but for me, really, I don't like spending too much time thinking about the fact that I'm not going to eat. I'm a head case. Like I will analyze until I paralyze. And so for me, I try to take a 3-2-1 go approach with most things in my life. And so I'll just wake up one day and be like, you know what? Let's lock in. No food. Maybe the night before, maybe the day before. But I don't have a big mindset tip for you to say something to the effect of, lock in, think about what you're going to be doing, set your intentions for the fast. I'm more of a begin and let the intentions and goals become clear to you throughout the duration of that journey. That's kind of what it's about, is remaining open. Remain open to the experience and surrender to the experience rather than trying to create a bunch of expectation and anticipation around what it's supposed to be. So I don't think too much about it. I just do it. The practical prep on the nutrition side, what I like to do is I really like to have my last meal of the day and even the day before be a lower carb day, like closer to a ketogenic approach. And my last meal of the day specifically. So what I mean by that is I will eat more protein. I will have far less carbohydrates, like somewhere between 75 grams or less, and a lot of fat, like 100 grams or more. So not quite keto, but definitely a low carb diet. And the reason I do that is because of its effect on blood sugar. I know if I were to have a meal with a ton of carbohydrates before bed that night or during the day, the next day my blood sugar would indefinitely do this, right? It would fall. And that would create hunger pangs. And the hunger pangs are going to come regardless. Your body is going to release ghrelin and lower leptin, the hunger and satiety hormones, respectively. You're going to get hungry. So I like to minimize that impact, specifically by making my last meal of the day ketogenic. So I'm going to have, I don't know, a fat ribeye with some vegetables cooked in butter and olive oil and maybe a couple of eggs, mostly protein, fat, and fiber. And that's going to create a huge satiety effect and a stable blood sugar effect. And I typically will have that at least 2 hours before bed, so I sleep really well the night before, because poor sleep can also compromise your appetite and wreck your leptin and ghrelin levels as well. One night of bad sleep can increase ghrelin by up to 20%. Ghrelin, again, is the hunger hormone. Leptin is the satiety hormone. When ghrelin is up and leptin is down, that is no bueno for your appetite. And then I wake up the next day with far more level blood sugar. So that's the first strategy. The day of and the days of the fast, I really don't try to do too much. I'm not lifting. I might lift the day one, wake up that morning and lift, but I'm not lifting again over the duration of that multi-day fast. I'm just not. It's a catabolic process, and I'm not putting anything into my body to make it ultimately anabolic, so I don't want to further the breakdown. The only form of activity I'm really doing is a lot of walking, because it keeps me busy, it keeps me occupied, it lets me meditate, it lets my mind wander, it breeds clarity, and it burns calories. So like win, you know? As far as what I'm putting in my body during the prolonged fast, it's water with electrolytes, specifically non-sweetened ones, and sparkling water, and the occasional black coffee. So earlier I alluded to something called snake juice. And this is what that guy, the snake diet, talks about when he fasts. And the reason I say I don't like taking electrolytes with sweeteners, this is conditional, because a lot of you know I take EcoLite, EcoVision's electrolyte supplement, and I even have my own signature flavor. It's the orange flavor. It tastes like orange cream. It's badass. It's delicious. You should try it. But when I'm fasting, I don't take that. I also don't do diet soda. And it's not because it will inherently break the fast. It's not because it's bad for me. It's because for me, consuming anything with a little bit of sweetness, even like chewing gum, for example, when I consume something with sweetness, it seems to more or less ramp up my appetite. And I would rather avoid that. So my electrolyte mix when I am in a fasted state doing a prolonged fast is very simple. It's 20 ounces of water, 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon of any kind of high quality salt, Himalayan pink, Redmond's real. If you have table salt, that's okay. And 1/4 teaspoon of no salt. Now, no salt is a sodium-free alternative that people with high blood pressure use to season their food. It kind of tastes like shit, but it's pure potassium. So it's literally 640 milligrams of potassium in 1/4 teaspoon, which is unbelievable. You could take that every day. It'd be great for you, because ideally you're supposed to have a 1-to-1 balance of sodium to potassium in your body, and not enough people get enough potassium. I digress. So I take that, and then I put some lime or lemon juice in the water, and I have 2 to 3 of those a day. And then I'll have a sparkling water when I get really hungry, because the carbonation takes up space in my stomach. And then, I should say, so yeah, that's my electrolyte mix, because it has no sweetener. It's even a bit bitter, and that doesn't taste great, which can mitigate my appetite. I will sometimes, not always, depending on the goals of the fast, but if the goal is fat loss and appetite mitigation, I will have black coffee, because caffeine is an appetite suppressant, and black coffee is bitter and astringent, which can also reduce and delay appetite. And that's it. That's all I consume during the fast. Nothing else. Nothing more. That's it. Keep it simple. Yes, you can have 0-calorie beverages on the fast, but that may make it more difficult for you. It's all about personal experience. The one thing I want to say, the couple of things I want to say is, in closing remarks to this episode, is you should anticipate hunger. Earlier, I mentioned that it's one of the most powerful forms of abstinence to abstain from food. And the clarity that can bring, the willpower, the confidence that you can do hard things that breeds is powerful. But you're going to be hungry. And I think it's so empowering to know, like, most people will always just get hungry and then go, I got to eat right now, or I'm going to fucking pass away. I'm going to fade away. I'm going to pass out. No, the fuck you're not. Most hunger comes and then it goes. And you can simply observe it as it leaves and understand, I can be hungry and I don't necessarily have to act on that impulse. And there's a greater lesson there about not always having to act on our human impulses and desires, and how that ultimately is what separates us from animals, because we are animals, we're mammals. And not always acting on our animal instincts is the thing that makes us human. The concept of willpower, discipline, of understanding that we should act in the best interest of us tomorrow and not us right now in the moment is what makes us human. And there's so much power in saying, I'm hungry right now, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, and that's okay. And that applies to all the hard things you do in your life. It's okay for something to be hard. Just because something is hard doesn't mean you have to try to change it. You can simply sit in the tension of what is, let it be hard, and let that be that. And there doesn't have to be anything more to it. So I think I've covered everything on how to drop and complete a successful prolonged fast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you're interested in joining the coaching community, like I said, I will put the link in the description of the episode on Spotify and YouTube. It's an amazing community of people. We meet 3 times a week for our coaching calls, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays, Tuesday nights, Thursday afternoons, Friday mornings. You can get live coaching access on social media growth, health and fitness, mindset, nutrition, public speaking, whatever you feel I can help you with. I am there to be your coach. You also have access to a community of hundreds of like-minded people with a WhatsApp that is quite literally popping 24 hours a day. And they've all become friends. We're running the Austin Marathon together. It really is a living, breathing community of people. So if you're interested in joining, hit the link in the description here, or you can go over to my Instagram. Either way, I hope this answers your questions on prolonged fasting. We'll drop a quick step check, and then I'm going to hit the road and go train. It's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I have 4,106 steps. Drop your step check in the comments, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for being here.